Hello, everyone, and welcome to Relic Law's Interview with an Expert series. I'm William Orlowitz, Principal Attorney at Relic Law. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dave Kelly, co-founder and CTO of SensCy. Dave has held government leadership positions in cyber command, threat intelligence, digital forensics, cyber response, and SOC operations. He's also led teams responsible for the integration, consolidation, and dissemination of cyber data for critical infrastructure defense and emergency preparedness, and has helped create the state of Michigan's first cyber incident response plan, led the authority to operate security audit program for software deployments, and was a recipient of the National State Scoop Cybersecurity Leadership Award. Dave joins us today to discuss how we can help change the cybersecurity culture of small and mid-sized enterprises. So Dave, welcome. We're excited for this conversation.
Hi, Will. Thanks for having me. I'm also excited to talk a little bit of cyber. So hopefully your audience will find some value in our discussion.
Outstanding. Well, with that, let's dive in and start tackling the first question. So Dave, just to give us some background, what is the, current state of cybersecurity among small and mid-sized businesses?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing, just for context to this question, for us to first kind of set the framework for the struggle that small and medium-sized organizations are having is cybersecurity personnel have become very expensive, right? There's a shortage of cybersecurity personnel. So small and medium-sized businesses generally can't afford to hire somebody to solely focus on cybersecurity. And then secondarily, the tools that are in the marketplace have generally been designed for large organizations, government agencies, and that's who they're marketed to. So small and medium-sized businesses have sort of been kind of left out of the marketplace, and that's sort of what we at SensCy are trying to solve for, is to provide an affordable solution to the small and medium-sized organizations out there across the United States and elsewhere. So I think it really boils down to, for small and medium-sized organizations, is helping them to really understand the things that they need to be doing from a cybersecurity perspective, right? That's the most important for them, is thing to them, is to bring them that understanding, so that they can know and have a game plan of what they should and shouldn't be doing. As far as specifically the current state, we're really seeing small and medium-sized organizations come in one and two camps, right? The first camp is they just think, well, I'm too small, it's not going to happen to me, which we're seeing is not the case. There's been a 400% increase year over year in cyber incidents occurring to small and medium-sized organizations. And the second camp, they're starting to get interested in doing something because they've either had somebody that they know in their network have an incident, or they've just been starting to worry about this because it's becoming up more and more in the news, and they have data that they know, client data or employee data or other information that they know they need to protect, and they just don't know where to get started.
Yeah, I think in our practice, we've seen both of those, as you mentioned. And the latter one, honestly, I'd call it decision paralysis, which is that, cybersecurity seems to be sort of a dense topic. There's all different aspects to it, and a lot of which is very technical. And so unless like an organization, has, some, just by chance, some expertise on its team, I feel like they feel like they can't penetrate the material very well, and so they just do nothing. Do you find that's true also?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, and absolutely what we're seeing. And we've made a very concerted effort to talk in plain language to these small and medium-sized organizations. Cybersecurity is full of acronyms, and if you're talking to a cybersecurity expert and you don't understand cybersecurity, it's almost like they're speaking a foreign language to you, right? Because it's 30% of the sentence is an acronym, right? So it's very important, if you're talking to the small and medium-sized market, that you simplify your language. We can talk about these things in simple terms. We don't have to use acronyms to describe what is multi-factor authentication, right? We don't have to say 2FA, MFA, all of these other terms that we use. We should be simply explaining it to them in a simple way and then providing them with the benefits and the risk analysis associated with doing or not doing it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I totally agree with your thoughts on the jargon and the use of the jargon. And I think anyone who's really, trying to help um, in cybersecurity, if they do have the expertise, it's incumbent upon them to make the complex simple so that the information is useful and actionable by their audience. And so I think that's been a huge disconnect, frankly, among a lot of the practitioners in this space and their customer base.
Yeah, I think it also takes down the stress level of the recipient, right? Because if you're trying to make a money decision on spending money on something, right, and you don't feel like you have a solid understanding of it, it's much more difficult to make that decision, right? But if you have somebody who's explaining it to you in a way that you understand it and you can immediately recognize the benefit of it, you're much more likely to then say, okay, I'm starting to get this. I'm starting to get the gist of this. How do we get started?
Yeah, exactly. So with that, Dave, let's jump to question two, which sort of ties into that conversation. Obviously in your work, you get to see a lot of the landscape. What would you say are some of the biggest cybersecurity vulnerabilities that sort of small and mid-sized enterprises are facing right now?
Yeah, it's amazing to me that this stat still rings true, but Stanford did a study last year and 88% of cybersecurity breaches are still caused by an employee making a mistake, right? Not intentionally, inadvertently, most of the time because they haven't been trained properly. So, and that's what we're seeing in the marketplace still to this day is many most of these attacks actually are caused by a business email compromise, and I can talk a little bit about what that is. Phishing emails, an employee falling for something, right? That looked real, that they clicked on or downloaded, and then it caused an incident for the company. And having a cybersecurity awareness program inside your organization and consistently providing that content to your employees is really critical in the small and medium-sized organizations, and really in any organization. I think the larger ones in the government are all, bought into that and understand that and have seen the benefit of that. And it's sort of starting to trickle down now um, to the small and medium-sized organizations. I can give you a good example. So we have a client. So we do cybersecurity awareness training for our clients. And we have a client who called us about a month ago and said, hey, your training just essentially saved me $300 or $300,000. And what happened was, he had received an email. He was getting ready to pay a large invoice, and he had received an email that came in to his email saying, "Hey, from his vendor that he was going to pay, our banking information has changed. Here's our new banking information. Please make sure you send the wire to this new banking information account." And we had just done a training. That's what's called a business email compromise, actually. And what had happened was that vendor's Microsoft account had been compromised. There was a threat actor that was inside that vendor's account. They were monitoring email. And when they saw the communication start between our client and that vendor, they moved all of that communication to another file folder, which is called the RSS feed. And nobody looks at the RSS feed, and most people don't know it exists. So now the threat actor is able to communicate with our client as if he was the vendor. And so luckily, we had just done a awareness training on this very topic, this exact scenario. He had looked at it, and so he looked at the email again. He went down and looked at the signature line and the phone number, and then compared that phone number to the phone number he had for the individual in his own database and realized the phone number was different. So then he
Wow.
called the actual vendor from the phone number that he knew to be accurate. And of course, that person said, "No, I did not change my banking information." So not only was he able to save the 300,000 plus invoice he was about to pay, But also he was able to alert his vendor that, hey, you might have a problem on your system that you need to look into.
Yeah, that is an amazing testimonial and an example of what can go wrong if proper training isn't applied. And so, I can say, and people don't realize how common what you just described is, but as a law firm, we get calls weekly, usually from small businesses that have had those types of wire fraud type business email compromise or phishing attacks, and how frequently those funds are transferred to a threat actor. And I can tell you from the legal side how difficult it can be to try to recover those funds, especially after the passage of time, because usually and quite often these transactions are not recognized immediately. Sometimes it takes a week or even longer for someone to go, hey, weren't we supposed to receive some funds, and they never came in. So they make a call, and then they discover what's taken place. And so this is definitely one of those things that's best treated on the front end versus trying to recover the money, after it's already been stolen. And I think, just to your point about training, there's so much fancy tooling, and you can have the most tightly configured network, but if you have staff or personnel who don't have any training, they can blow your cybersecurity up very quickly if they do something that exposes your organization. So the emphasis on training, and you see it in the claims that come in on cyber liability insurance policies, the human factor is still one of the most exploited vulnerabilities that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 100% true. It's been true, I think, from day one, and it still rings true. And I think your point is a good one, that we can spend money on tools, we can have hire great personnel, and even those great personnel that are working in cybersecurity will say, I can't prevent somebody from making a mistake, right? We can sometimes mitigate the risk with tools, and maybe what they do doesn't spread, but it's not necessarily going to completely stop it. We have to like kind of we have to sort of build a plan, and from the top down, make our employees understand that it's important to get this training. And we position it really as an employee benefit, as opposed to, oh no, I have to do more training. And how we do that is, our cyber awareness training always starts off with, hey, you're online in your personal life, your kids are online, you know how to keep them safe, and here's some things you should be doing in your personal life. And oh, by the way, we also have a policy at work, right? And you should be doing these things at work. And then we encourage our clients, employees, to share this with your spouse, share this with your family members, right? We want to make the world a safer place from cybersecurity. This should be a benefit to you to understand these things, as opposed to, I think, in some training programs, there's a punitive nature to it, right? If you don't take it, you're going to get in trouble. If you don't score high enough on the test, you're going to get in trouble. We're trying to flip the script on that and say, no, this is something that we all need to learn, and we all need to collaboratively get better at. And it's not a punitive thing. It's actually a benefit to you to understand these things, because you can take those into your personal life and secure yourself at home and secure your home. I mean, we're all, think about it, we're all starting to put things into our home, Ring doorbells, and like security cameras. All these things are TVs, they're all connected to the internet. We should understand how to properly secure them.
That's an incredibly great strategy. I think the carrot versus the stick is smart, and I think also, I know from myself, if a topic is brought to me that is something that I want to learn versus I'm being force fed, it doesn't even usually fit within my job description. It's much more difficult to remember and use that information. So that's a really smart strategy. So Dave, I'm going to take us to question 3, which is, how companies like SensCy, given SensCy's mission and where it's positioned, help make cybersecurity more accessible.
Yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit in one of my previous answers, but I think it really starts with helping small and medium-sized organizations just understand sort of what is cybersecurity, right? What is basic cybersecurity hygiene, right? Because if you don't have the proper basic cybersecurity hygiene in place, whatever tools you have, you're lowering their ability to help you, right? And so making it more accessible really revolves around helping your client base better understand why, right? Why is this important? I think that's just human nature. That if we don't understand the why, oftentimes we don't make a decision, right? But once we understand the why, then it's easier for us to make a decision. It's easier to get buy-in. It's easier to build a plan. And that's kind of how we do it. So we start off with a cybersecurity assessment, right, that we give to our clients. And what we've done is we've taken some best practices from the National Institute of Technology Standard, NIST, and we've brought those down into a short cybersecurity assessment that we go through with our clients, and it's based on it's calibrated just like your credit score. So we all know if we have an 800 credit score, that's great. That's like the creme of the crop credit score. We can, get a mortgage, whatever. If we're at 700, that's really good. If we're below 700, then our interest rates start to come into play, and maybe we can't get approved. If we're in the 500s, good luck. Like nobody's going to finance us, right? So I think by doing simple things like that, if we have somebody who knows nothing about cyber and they take the assessment, and we actually have a good story about this. We have who's a client now. They took the assessment for their company and they scored a 512, I believe it was. And their first comment to us was, "Well, I guess I can't buy a Corvette, right? So what should I be doing here, right, to improve this score?" So if you do smart, we try to do smart things like this to help the conversation get started, right? And then when we're building the cyber health plan for them, you can't overwhelm these small businesses. Their main function is to run their small business, hopefully become profitable and have a good quality of life for themselves. Cyber is not their priority, right? So it's incumbent upon us to help them build out their cyber health plan in small chunks, right? Let's take some things that are easy, right? We talked about the business email compromise, right? Okay, client, so you're using Outlook. Let us help you get 2FA established on that. Oh, see, I used an acronym. Let's help you get multi-factor authentication established on that, right? Here's the steps that you need to do that, right? Let's help you get a solid password policy in place, right? These are the things that are going to most protect you from some of the employee mistakes that we just talked about, right? So it's sort of like being their physical trainer, right? And then helping them to do the push-ups and the exercises that they need to do to improve their cyber posture.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, and the sentiment that essentially you have to start small, you have to start with the basics. I mean, you hear the phrase, crawl, walk, run, thrown around. It really does make sense, and I think there is a return on investment that is significant with basic cyber hygiene, right? So, even in the cybersecurity incidents that we handle at the firm, a lot of them, the vast majority, are caused by the same issues or vulnerabilities that occur over and over and over again, all of which would normally be addressed by basic cyber hygiene. Sure, there's APTs and more advanced threats that target very specific enterprises, and they're sophisticated, and they probably require more sophisticated tooling. But the vast majority of what I would call opportunistic cyber attacks are usually countered by basic cyber hygiene. Is that something that you guys think as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the way that this needs to be thought about from any business really is it's really it's a risk mitigation strategy, right? And so if the majority of attacks are coming in the way that you just described, which is actually true, right? If we get those basic cyber hygiene things in place, we've just dramatically reduced our risk of becoming a victim, because the very, very sophisticated attackers are usually pointing at larger enterprises even to this day. But what the less sophisticated attackers have realized is, wow, there's a whole marketplace out there of people who are doing nothing. So I can do an unsophisticated attack And maybe I won't get, 10 terabytes of data and be able to extort someone from $1 million, but I can extort them for $50,000 and do it 50 times, right? This is what we're seeing. This is what we're seeing out there in the wild. And you also mentioned, cyber liability insurance. One thing that we have noticed, it's really interesting, is as we walk our clients through getting this cyber hygiene in place, the basic cyber hygiene things in place, when they're going to renew their insurance policy, we're actually noticing that their coverage is going up, right? So the coverage that they had previously versus once they got their cyber hygiene in place, their coverage went through the roof, right? They got much better coverage, right? Which again provides that buffer of cushion should an incident happen to them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, obviously, insurance companies are in the business of underwriting risk, and I think, the more an applicant for insurance can demonstrate that they've got a baseline in terms of a cybersecurity program in place, or even just doing some of the right things as part of that insurance due diligence process, it's going to absolutely change their insurance profile and their risk profile for the underwriter. So, absolutely. Dave, question 4 is, and obviously this is directly relevant to our work, given that we advise on these topics from the legal side. But do you think that all the proliferation of new laws and regulations around privacy, data protection, cybersecurity are, helping to drive cybersecurity forward, or which is I think the intent of the legislatures and the regulators, or is it really just making the whole thing way more complicated?
I think it's a combination of both. Um, actually, so driving cybersecurity forward, I think in certain sectors we're seeing that. So in the manufacturing sector, we're absolutely seeing that. There are regulations that are have recently been talked about for a long time and are coming down now on the manufacturing industry. We're also seeing it in the software development space pretty significantly. So a lot of these software development companies that are either contracting with universities or contracting with the government or even contracting with larger companies are starting to now get questionnaires sent to them. Hey, before we even like do business with you, we need to know what your cybersecurity posture is, right? And there's not a lot of standardization here right now, which goes to making it more complicated. So we've seen one particular client, I think over the last year, has gotten 6 different surveys sent to them saying, we want to know what you're doing in your cybersecurity. And some of them have been upwards of 50 pages long, right? And all of it's driven probably by the the government agency or the university or the large company that small software company is contracting with, having a regulation that's on them, that's a supply chain regulation, and now it's kind of trickling downhill, right?
Yeah, we see that same kind of flow down from the top. And, the truth of the matter is a lot of small and mid-sized companies service much larger organizations, whether they be government or whether they're just big business. And those companies, right, they're subjected to an entirely different landscape of cyber risk. But a lot of that risk exists in their own supply chains. And so from the contractual side, we see a lot of flow downs, whether those are driven by federal laws or regulations, as you mentioned on the manufacturing and defense side, or whether they're just driven by, different requirements that those companies have based on the jurisdictions in which they're operating. So those flow downs are really making this a problem for the small and mid-sized enterprise. And I think that's kind of what you were alluding to.
Yeah, exactly. And the nice thing is, again, like going back to sort of let's get the basics in place, let's get our cyber hygiene posture in order, right? What happens is you become much more prepared to answer those questionnaires, because as they come in, you're like, yep, we're doing that. Yep, we're already doing that. And then some of the complex stuff that you may not be doing, if you're doing all of these other things, we're seeing that they're much more likely to say, okay, you've got it. We validated that you have a cybersecurity program in place, and that's enough. You don't have to be 100% doing 100% of these things. They're not looking for that. They're looking to determine, do you have a cyber secure mindset and program inside your organization, right? We've seen that most of them realize that some of these smaller organizations aren't going to be able to spend, $200,000 on an on an endpoint detection and response platform, right? It's not in their budget. But if they're doing all of these other things, they're much more likely to then say, yeah, okay, we can do business with you and we'll award this contract.
Yeah, totally. I think that what you said it reflects industry thinking on this, which is that if you can determine that a particular organization or company is at least cyber minded, right? It's almost a litmus test of how big of a risk they likely present, right? If cybersecurity and protecting the information that they receive as part of the work that they do is not even on their radar, that's usually a sign that they're probably wide open to vulnerabilities and exploitation versus someone who at least is familiar with it and has a sort of a plan to mature in their cyber posture over time. That company is probably going to be just categorically, much less riskier to do business with.
Yeah, absolutely. I have another example of that. We have a client that and remember I told you that our cyber assessment is based on like a credit score scale, right? So 800 is considered, good, and then it kind of goes down from there. When we first met with this client, they had some surveys coming at them, and they knew they weren't sure how to even answer these questions. And when we gave them the cyber health evaluation, they actually scored an 8, a single
Wow.
digit 8 out of 1,000, right? And it was kind of funny because I wasn't the one who was on that call, but the person who was reached out to me and said, "Hey, I think our algorithm's broken," because it's a proprietary algorithm that we created that sort of weights these questions, right, based on what's more likely to cause an incident. This company just scored an 8, and I looked at it, I said, "No, it's correct. It's actually working." But the great thing about that company now is over the course of about 6 or 7 months, they're up over 800 now. So
Wow.
that owner of that company said, "Hey, we're getting more and more of these questionnaires. I need help." And we've been able to help them get their score up over 800 now, in less than a year. So it's a really great success story, and it just shows that you can do this, right? It just requires you to sort of follow a plan and assign somebody to help drive that plan internally, and then work with a partner like SensCy to help you drive it externally, right? And then together we can get to a place. And now when they're applying for these various contracts and things, they have a story to tell, right? Hey, yep, we're doing this. And in fact, not only are we doing external vulnerability scanning, we're doing external vulnerability scanning persistently, right? They know what to say on these assessments now.
Yeah, that's really cool. And honestly, kudos to that company. I mean, they should have earned some extra points maybe for their honesty because I've run into so many companies they will feign the cybersecurity posture, but they know that they're just they're stretching it a bit. They're exaggerating the measures that they've taken, and so good on them that they answered so sincerely and have made that much progress. That's a great story.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that as well. I will say we've seen that as well. But sometimes you can get through that by asking the right follow-up questions, and then they're like, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, actually, no." Um, but this particular CEO, and that's who we talked to, was basically like, I want to get better, and there's no way for me to get better if I don't know where I stand, right? So let's go through this. Let's do it. I know it's going to be important to the future of my company.
Yeah, I think your approach is very good because it inherently takes the shame out of it. And frankly, there's no value in, feeling embarrassed or ashamed about your practices in the state that they're in, if you have the intention to turn it around. So it's like the first step is really admitting, hey, we need to put some attention on this. We need to put some effort on this, and we can materially change our risk profile by doing some basic stuff, rather than feeling so embarrassed about it that you just keep it closeted, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's there's no shame, and we don't know what we don't know, right? And it's kind of like, why are our 401ks all invested in mutual funds? Because we're not stock traders, right? Like that's not our expertise. Like, let somebody else handle that for us, and hopefully things will turn out, things are gonna turn out much better than if we were trying to manage that on our own.
Yeah, 100%. So, Dave, I'm going to jump to question 5, which is, how well do you think most small and mid-sized enterprises are prepared to handle a serious security breach? And maybe I can just qualify that a little bit. What I mean here is like a serious incident that's going to impact them operationally, reputationally, legally, and perhaps in other ways, contractually. So the types of things like I'm thinking of here would be ransomware, major cyber extortion, mass exfiltration of sensitive data. Are they, you know, I know from our conversation so far, I can probably guess as to what you're going to say, but I'm interested in just hearing what your take is on this question.
Yeah, not prepared at all. In fact, I think this is probably the place where most small and medium-sized organizations are least prepared. I believe our current data right now from all of the evaluations that we've done, about 70% of these small and medium-sized organizations do not even have a cybersecurity incident response plan in place. And if you think about that, most of them have they know what to do in the case of a tornado or a fire, right? They've got that in place, but they don't have a cybersecurity incident response plan in place. And what's more likely to happen? You're going to have a fire at your building, or you're going to have a cyber incident, right? And I think when you put it to them like that, they're like, oh, well, that actually makes sense. Yeah, it probably is more likely that I'm going to have a cyber incident. It goes back to, if there is an incident, time is of the essence, right? And if you have a cybersecurity incident response plan in place that you can activate, and it takes you through things step by step, right? You don't necessarily have to understand cybersecurity to activate that plan and manage it, right? And I think, Will, you'll agree with me. A lot of times what happens is when the forensics team comes out, if you don't have a cybersecurity incident response plan and you haven't been asking the right questions of your team and documenting things, that response team is going to come out at $500 an hour and spend the first 10 or 12 hours asking you a bunch of questions that you could have got answered right out of the gate, right? Which would then shortcut your downtime, shortcut your expense to getting back up, and also better educate you as the owner, executive, manager at the company, as to what we need to do in the future to prevent this from happening.
Yeah, I agree. And having, served as, lead counsel on countless major security incidents, right? The organizations that were not prepared to handle this, and I mean small to mid-sized companies, some in the professional services space, some in the consumer and retail space, and some in the manufacturing space, where they did not have a plan, and they did not, they were not equipped to deal with it. It was crisis mode within those companies. I mean, absolute pandemonium. Employees were thinking that the sky is falling. Customers were getting angry and so there was basically no way for that organization to smoothly triage and work through any type of incident response protocol because they were just on fire, right? And so I think that a lot of the damage that, even as counsel, we can't fix is the stuff that occurs by the company itself within the first, few hours, if you will, after a serious incident is discovered, because they're sometimes causing a loss of their own information so that we don't have the forensics record. They are miscommunicating to their counterparties and contractual partners. They're saying things publicly that can cause them liability. And so I think the incident response planning component is like it's essential.
Yeah, it should absolutely have, to your point, right? It should have templates in there. How am I going to communicate and what am I going to say? And then once you have that template, it should be reviewed by legal counsel, where legal counsel like, okay, this is okay, right? So that way, when our early communication is already in the can, it's ready to go. So if we have an incident, we know what we're going to send out. We don't end up in that sort of legal liability situation. And then additionally, right, simple things like if our network goes down, this is what causes the pandemonium, right? How do we communicate with each other? We're so used to being, you and I are on this, both probably on our laptops right now doing this. If this goes down, how are we going to talk to each other internally, right? So a good incident response plan will have that laid out, right? In advance, we've got something as simple as a group text message on phones with everybody's number in there, and that thing is called, cyber incident group. And all of our people that are in our incident response plan are in that group. And now we have a way to immediately communicate with each other, activate the plan, and get going. But if we're trying to do that while our hair's on fire because we're in the middle of an incident, it'll never get done. And this is what causes a lot of the chaos, right? These things need to be thought through in advance, documented, and then the team needs to understand, okay, cool, I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing in the event we have an incident.
Yeah, definitely. And all of that, it's all prophylactic, right? So everything you described, Dave, is stuff that organizations can do upfront. And for what it's worth, even though a serious security breach is, always going to be a difficult and traumatic experience for any company. They're not black swan events. They happen with increasing regularity. And the more prepared they are to do those initial steps, like even as insofar as who are we going to call to help us with this,
Yes.
is a huge advantage. And they can be handled smoothly, and to try to, dig out from whatever, may have occurred. So great thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's hard to make, I mean, all of us are all human, right? When you're under significant stress, it becomes much more difficult to make decisions, and particularly if it's on a topic that you're not super familiar with, right? So if you have a game plan to follow, right, it tremendously helps you to even just ask the right questions at the start of the incident, which is really important, and document those answers, right? Um, it's going to shortcut the process, the expense, the recovery time, your reputational damage that can happen, right? All of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dave, the last question here for you today, is, maybe one that someone can take home and think about, which is, where can small and mid-sized enterprises look to find practical help with their cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll first point to us. We're SensCy. SensCy stands for Sensible Cyber. We were actually founded to help small and medium-sized organizations. Um, I've spent a lot of years in cybersecurity, as have our co-founders. And one of the things that we found, and really was troublesome to us, is there was really nobody out there specifically designed to help the small and medium-sized organizations. So that was the catalyst for starting SensCy. Was let's put together a practical solution for these small and medium-sized organizations, so they can also be protected even when they don't have these large budgets of these government agencies or Fortune 500 companies. Um, some other places, one thing I do recommend is it's always important, before you reach out to anyone about cybersecurity, is to, try to have a basic understanding. There are some resources out there. The Center for Internet Security, CISA, they have a small business section that you can read through and start to at least get a basic understanding of, you know, how do these things tie together, right? How does my employee training um, impact, or sorry, mitigate the risk of me having a cyber security incident? Why is it important for my administrators, the people who work on my IT systems, to also be using multi-factor authentication, right? There's a lot of resources out there that you can read about, get a general understanding. And so then when you reach out to someone like SensCy, or you'll be sort of speaking the same language right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think those are really great tips and very practical. And I think what you said, Dave, about, developing just a baseline understanding, just really a practical understanding of like some of the key components, of cybersecurity, what it involves. I mean, even the most basic understanding is understanding that there's physical, technical, and administrative type controls, right? Just different types of aspects to security itself, is going to help you, if you're a business owner or a manager or just someone who's tasked with this for a small company, think through what it is that you need to do from the big picture. And I think that there's a big difference between that, which is enabling and empowering yourself to navigate and make some critical decisions around cybersecurity, versus feeling overwhelmed and trying to become the subject matter expert yourself. Because Dave, I'm sure you'll agree with me on this, that no matter how long you work in this space, it is an ocean in terms of its breadth and depth. And there's so much material and it changes so rapidly that it's really not realistic for an individual who isn't completely immersed in it to master it. And I think that's, if you set yourself up to try to achieve that, you're probably setting yourself up to fail. And so I think it's understanding what you should know versus what you should understand well enough to work with someone else on. And I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think any of us who are in the space are constantly learning, because the threat actors are constantly changing their tactics, right? New technology is continuously coming out that we might not even be aware of, that could be in our client's environment, right? So cybersecurity professionals have to be lifelong learners, because this field is continuously changing. And there's going to be nobody who knows everything. I always say cybersecurity is a team sport. It requires folks like you, Will, and us to collaborate with each other, along with the client, right? We're in this together, right? We're in this together trying to protect ourselves from a bad outcome. And I would also say that one litmus test that you can use, if you're looking for, let's say you don't have the time to do that research, right? And you're like, hey, I need help. I don't have the time to do this research. When you're talking to somebody that you're thinking about bringing on to help you with your cybersecurity, if they can't explain it to you in a way that you understand it, that's the first red flag, right? They need to be able to explain it to you in a way that you understand it and that you're comfortable with doing what they're recommending that you do. Then move on to the next person and try to find somebody who can explain it to you in a way that you get it, even if you don't have time to do the research.
Yeah, I think somebody wise once said that the ability to make something complex simple is one of the truest signs of intelligence, and I think that that's true here. And I think that like many things, cybersecurity has folks involved in it that really are not that interested in helping the clients as much as they are in sort of just selling solutions and doing things that are profitable for them, but not necessarily the right types of approaches or tools or systems that their clients actually need. And so I think your litmus test, or the lens through which you should evaluate those that you're looking to hire or engage for cybersecurity related services, is a really smart one that people should take away from this conversation. Well, with that, Dave, I really appreciate your time, and I'll jump into our end slide here. And thanks for joining us, Dave.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Will. I greatly appreciate it, and I hope your audience found some value in what we had in our little conversation today, and got some good takeaways and things to think about. I think both of our missions are to help folks better understand cybersecurity, get more comfortable with it, and at least start to take some action, do something, right? Do something today to help protect your business.
Absolutely. So this concludes this installment of Relic Law's interview with an expert series. Dave, thanks again for your time. And if you want to learn more about Relic Law's cybersecurity practice, you can visit us at reliclawpllc.com. Thank you.